This lecture, I'm going to show you how can you develop a full-fledged stopwatch app in the Applab on code.org. So we are going to start with designing this screen first, and after that we are going to define the required code here in this workspace of the coding panel. Let's come on this design panel first. So here I am going to define a label box right on the top. Let's increase the height and width of this label box, and now I am going to increase the font size of the text which is going to get reflected in this label box. So we can come over here in this properties section, and that's how we can increase the font size of the text. Right, now let's come down and play with this text alignment property. So I would like to see it somewhere in the center, so that's the reason I am choosing the center option. Okay, now I am going to define two buttons over here on this screen one. Let's put the first button over here, and the second button I am going to place it right next to this first button. Okay, now this button I would like to use for starting this timer. So let's replace the text which is getting reflected right on the top of this button with start. Okay, and let's change the background color also of this button. So I'm going to change it to green for now. Okay, now let's come on this button, and I am going to replace the text with stop. So we'll use this button for stopping the timer. Right, let's come down, and from here we are going to choose a relevant background. Let's go for red. Right, now let's come on this coding panel and start defining the code that we can use for controlling this timer. So the first thing that we need to do is, in order to keep a check on the values which are going to get reflected over here in this label box, we can define a counter variable. So for that we can make use of this block, and we can put it right on the top over here. Let's convert it into text-based coding, and now I'm going to initialize this variable with this value 0. Right, so var is the keyword with which you can declare any variable on this JavaScript based platform, and this is how you can initialize any variable with some value. Okay, now I am going to come back on this UI controls panel, and let's define the code for this start button first. So I'm going to put this uneven block over here in this workspace right below this code which I have defined in this workspace. Let's change the ID of this uneven block. So the ID of this button is button 1. Let's select button 1 from this drop down. Now when the user will hit this button 1, I would like to see the value of X getting reflected over here in this label box. So for doing that, we can come on this, we can make use of this set text property. Right, so let's put it over here, and now because we are setting the text for this component, the ID of which is label 3, so that is the reason we need to select label 3 from this drop down. Okay, now I would like to set the text equal to the value of X, right, of this label. So for that, let's convert it into text-based coding, and let's replace this text over here with X. So now whatever the value of X will be, this label box, the text of this label box is going to get set with that value of X. So let's run this app and check whether we are going to get the required output or not. Now here in this watches section, we are going to check the value of x. So when you'll write down x over here, and after writing x, when you'll press enter, so this is what you'll get to see. So at present the value of x is 0. Let's see whether we'll be able to see the same value getting reflected over here in this label box also when after pressing this start button or not. So 0 is coming over here. So this code is working perfectly fine. Let's reset this app. Okay, now as soon as the user will hit this start button, I would like the timer to get on. So what I want should happen is the value over here should start getting incrementing. Okay, at initially it is 0, but as soon as the user will hit the start button, it should start getting incrementing automatically after a specific interval of time. So after every 1 second, I would like this value to get incremented by 1. That's how I am going to define the required code over here now inside this uneven block. Come over here in this control section of the toolbox. Here you'll find a block with name timed loop, which you can make use of for achieving the output. Let's pick it and drop it over here. Now here inside this timed loop, I am going to write down a statement. Okay, now this timed loop is going to execute this line of code after every 1000 millisecond. Timed loop is going to execute this line of code after every 1000 milliseconds. That means that after every 1 second, the value of x is going to get incremented by 1. Let's see whether we'll be able to see the value of x getting reflected over here or not. So I'm running this app now, and let's hit the start button. Okay, so we are not able to see the value of x getting incrementing over here, but here it is continuously incrementing. Now what are we missing? The thing which we are missing is we haven't placed this set text block inside this timed loop. So that is the reason we are not able to see the value of x getting reflected over here. Right, the present value of x getting reflected over here. Let's reset this game and cut this line of code from here. Now I am going to put that line of code inside this uneven block, inside this timed loop, just before this line of code. Okay, now when you run this app and hit the start button, you will be able to see the desired output. Right, so as you can see, after every 1 second, this value of x is incrementing, and we are able to see the value of x getting reflected on this app like this. Right, so this code is working perfectly fine. Now let's reset this game. Initially I don't want to see this text getting reflected over here. Okay, so what we can do, we can select this label box and let's replace it with time. Right, now let's come back on this coding panel. Okay, and here in this set text block we can make some changes so as to get the time reflected in a more beautiful way. So I'm going to make use of this text time, and let's concatenate it with the value of x. Now when you run this app, this is what you're going to see as an output. Right, so now it is looking much beautiful. Okay, let's reset this game. Now if the user want to stop the timer at any point of time, he can hit this button over here. So let's define the code for this stop button now. We can make use of this uneven block. I'm going to put it right below this uneven block. Okay, now the ID of this button is button 2. Let's convert it into block based coding and select button 2 from this drop down. Now when the user will hit this stop button, I would like the timer to stop. So for that we can come on this control section, and the loop which is actually controlling the value of x is this timed loop. If you want to stop this timed loop, this is the block stop time loop which you can make use of. So I'm going to pick it and drop it inside this uneven block. Let's now run this app and see whether we'll be able to get the required output or not. So let's start the timer. So the timer is on. Okay, after every 1 second we are able to see this value changing. Now let's stop the timer. Okay, so the timer has stopped. Let's start the timer one more time. Okay, so the timer has again begun. Okay, let's stop the timer. So that's how you can play with these buttons. That's how you can control this timer with the help of these two buttons that we have defined over here. Now every time I am hitting this stop button, this timer is going off. But when I am starting it, it is not starting from zero. It is starting from the point where I have stopped it. So how can I define a code with which I can again make the timer start from zero? So what we can do, we can add a line of code over here, something like this: x is equal to 0. Now when the user will hit the stop button, the value of x will become 0 and the timer will stop. Now if the user will hit the start button again, the timer is going to begin from this position. Let's run this game and see whether we'll be able to get the required output or not. So the timer is on right now. Let's hit the stop button to stop the timer. Okay, now let's start the timer again. So as you can see, it started from 0, right? So that's how you can achieve the required output. Now the next thing that I would like to do is I would like to increase the speed of the timer. One way we can do it is by changing this value over here. So if you'll change this to 100, what is going to happen? Let's check it out. So now after every 100 millisecond, this value is changing. Let's stop this timer. Okay, now when you'll start it again, it is going to start from 0. Okay, so that's how you can increase the speed. If you will further reduce it down, let's reduce it down to 10. Now when you'll run this stopwatch, so this is what you'll get to see. Okay, that's how you can increase the speed of your timer. Let's stop this. Let's start this again. Okay, so that's how that is one of the ways you can increase the speed of this timer. I don't want to make the changes in this timed loop every time I want to increase the speed. We can instead of passing a hardcore value, we can pass a value which we can control with the help of a button. So let's come on this designing part, and here I am going to define two more buttons. So this is the button which I am going to make use of for speeding up my stopwatch, and this one I am going to make use of for speeding down my stopwatch. Okay, and now let's change the background color also of these two buttons. So I am changing this one, changing the background color of this to, let's make it blue. Yeah, and let's change the background color of this one to, I think this is looking great, or let's go for this one. Yeah, this is perfectly fine. And if you want to play with the theme of this screen, you can make use of this theme option present right on the top in this design toolbox. Let's select an appropriate theme for this beautiful stopwatch app. Okay, this is also looking good. And how about this one? This is also fine, right? Let's now come back on this coding panel. Now I am going to define a code for this button with which we can control the value of this timed loop. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's first change this to 1000. Okay, now we are going to define an uneven block for this button 3 right in the bottom of this workspace, and let's change the ID to button 3. So we can do it manually like this also. If you want to convert it into block based coding, thereafter you want to make some changes over here, you can do it like that also, right? Now every time the user will hit this button 3, I would like the speed of the timer to increase. Okay, so how can we do that? Now instead of passing a hardcore value over here for this time loop, we can control this value with the help of counter variable. Let's convert it into text-based coding first. And right on the top over here, I am going to define a counter variable y, and let's initialize it with this 1000. Okay, now let's come over here inside this uneven block we have got in this workspace for this button 3, and here I am going to define a code. So now every time the user will hit this button 3, the value of y will get decremented by 100. Let me show it to you how is it going to happen. So let's run this app. So as you can see over here in this watcher section, the value of y is 1000 at present. Let's hit this speed up button. So as you can see, the value has gone down to 900. So every time I'm hitting this speed up button, the value is decrementing by 100. Right, let's reset this app. Now instead of passing a hardcore value for this timed loop over here, let's replace this by y. Let's now run this app, and now I'm going to set the value of this y first. So let's make use of this speed up button, and I am setting it to 300. Now let's start the timer. So as you can see, the timer is now running fast. Right, earlier it was changing after every 1 second. Now it is changing after every 300 milliseconds. Right, now if you'll hit this speed up button in between somewhere when the timer is in running mode, so it is not going to affect the speed of this timer. Now why is it so? Because this timer over here is running with the speed y which we set with the help of this button before we start the timer. Okay, so how can we get rid of this? If we want to increase the speed somewhere in the middle when the timer is in running mode, so how can we achieve this thing? So what we can do, we can copy this code from here and let's put it inside this uneven block. Now when you'll run this app and start the timer, so you'll be able to see the value over here is changing after every 1 second. Now if you want to increase the speed of this change, you can hit this speed up button. So you will be able to see the desired changes getting reflected on this beautiful screen over here. So now the value is changing as per the current value of y. Right, so that's how you can achieve the output. Let's reset this game and define the required code for this speed down button. So we are going to copy this whole code from here and let's put it just below this button 3's uneven code. Now the ID of this button is button 4. Let's replace it with 4, and here the only change which we have to make is we need to change this minus to plus. So now when you run this app, and start the timer. So that this is what you'll get to see when you'll hit this speed up button. Okay, and this is what you will get when you will hit this speed down button. Right, so we are able to control the speed with the help of these two buttons over here. We are also able to start and stop timer with the help of these two buttons over here. So that's how you can make a beautiful stopwatch app on code.org in the Applab using the basic features available over here in this lab. Hope you guys enjoyed this lecture a lot. Do like this lecture, and thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day. Bye bye.